A single mother is ridiculed for caring for a comatose millionaire, but when he wakes up a year later, his first words shake his elite world to its core. A story of betrayal, redemption, and the power of real love. What would you do if your life changed forever? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The lights of Atlanta's skyline twinkled against the dark February sky as Sarah Johnson hurried through the hospital's staff entrance. At 32, she was the newest nurse at Mercy General, and being late for her night shift wasn't the impression she wanted to make. Her young son's babysitter had shown up late again, but Sarah knew better than to offer excuses in a world that already judged her for being a single black mother. "Sarah, thank goodness you're here," Linda, the head nurse, called out as soon. As Sarah reached the nurse's station, "We've got a VIP patient coming in, William Blackwood III. Sarah's eyes widened. Everyone in Atlanta knew that name. The Blackwoods owned half the city's real estate developments. "The car crash is all over the news," Linda continued, handing Sarah a chart. "He swerved to save his wife during their anniversary dinner drive. She walked away without a scratch, but he's in critical condition." The emergency room doors burst open. Paramedics rushed in with a stretcher, followed by a tall, elegant woman in a designer dress, her makeup streaked with tears. "That's Victoria Stanford Blackwood, his wife," Linda whispered. "1 year married today." Sarah watched as Victoria grabbed the attending doctor's arm. "Do you know who my husband is? He needs the absolute best care. I want specialists flown in from wherever necessary." The next few hours were a blur of activity. William Blackwood III, or Bill as Sarah learned he preferred to be called, was stabilized but remained unconscious. The initial diagnosis wasn't good: severe head trauma with possible long-term complications. Sarah was assigned to Bill's care team, much to Victoria's visible displeasure. The look the wealthy woman gave Sarah when she entered the room to check Bill's vitals spoke volumes. "Are you qualified?" Victoria asked, her tone dripping with doubt as she looked Sarah up and down. "Yes, Mrs. Blackwood. I graduated top of my class from Emory University's nursing program." Victoria pursed her lips. "Well, I suppose the hospital knows what they're doing. Just be careful with everything. It's all very expensive." As the night progressed, Sarah noticed how Victoria spent more time on her phone than looking at her husband. She overheard snippets of conversations about insurance policies and power of attorney. When Victoria finally left around midnight, Sarah was checking Bill's IV. She looked at his peaceful face, handsome despite the bruising and bandages. "You know, Mr. Blackwood," she said softly while adjusting his pillows, "I've seen all kinds of people in this hospital, rich, poor, all colors and backgrounds. But when they're here in this bed, none of that matters. What matters is the fight inside them." She didn't know then that this was just the beginning, that this unconscious man would change her life forever, or that she would face the biggest challenges of her career in the months to come. She didn't know that the whispers had already started about how inappropriate it was for someone like her to care for someone like him. All Sarah knew was that she had a job to do, and she would do it with everything she had, just like her grandmother had taught her. Stand tall, work hard, and never let anyone tell you what you can't do. The news vans were already gathering. Outside the hospital, their lights creating artificial day in the parking lot. Tomorrow, the whole city would be talking about Bill Blackwood's accident. But here in the quiet of the ICU, it was just Sarah doing what she did best, caring for those who needed her, regardless of who they were or where they came from. "Well, Mr. Blackwood," she said, making one final check before her rounds, "looks like it's just you and me for now, and I promise you I'm not going anywhere." She had no way of knowing how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how much resistance she would face for keeping that promise. The story that was about to unfold would shake Atlanta's high society to its core and challenge everything everyone thought they knew about love, loyalty, and the power of dedicated care. In the coming days, the comfortable world of the Blackwoods would clash spectacularly with Sarah's practical, down-to-earth approach to life and healing. But for now, in the quiet of that first night, it was just a nurse, doing her job, unaware that she was about to become the center of a story that would change not just 2 lives, but an entire community's perspective on what really matters when life hangs in the balance. Word spread quickly through Atlanta's elite social circles about Bill Blackwood's condition. By the end of the first week, the hospital's private wing had become a parade of designer suits and expensive perfumes. Sarah noticed how these visitors barely looked at Bill, instead focusing on Victoria, and her dramatic shows of grief. "It's just terrible," Victoria sobbed to a group of society ladies one afternoon, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. And to make matters worse, the hospital assigned, well, she glanced at Sarah, who was checking Bill's vital signs. "Let's just say I'm not sure about the quality of care." Sarah pretended not to hear, but her hands tightened slightly on the blood pressure cuff. She thought about her son Marcus, and just 6 years old, and how she was working double shifts to give him a better life. These people had no idea what real struggle looked like. James Davidson, the Blackwood family lawyer, became a regular presence. Sarah didn't like the way he huddled with Victoria in corners, speaking in hushed tones that stopped whenever anyone came near. "Mrs. Blackwood," Sarah overheard him say one day, "we need to act quickly while he's still unconscious. The power of attorney paperwork." Victoria cut him off with a sharp look when she noticed Sarah in the doorway, but Sarah's concerns grew when she saw the parade of papers Victoria was signing. Through snippets of conversation, she learned that Victoria was taking control of Bill's companies, claiming it was for his own good. One quiet night shift, Sarah was surprised by a visit from Rose, Bill's elderly housekeeper of 30 years. "I had to come when everyone else was gone," Rose explained, her worn hands clutching her purse. "Miss Victoria, she's changing everything at the house, firing long-time staff, bringing in her own people. She's even trying to sell Mr. Bill's beloved horses." Sarah listened as Rose talked about the Bill that nobody in the hospital knew, a man who treated his staff like family, who loved riding horses at dawn, and who had built his fortune while never forgetting his father's lessons about treating people with respect. "He used to say that money doesn't make the man," Rose said, tears in her eyes. "The man makes the money, and what matters is what he does with it." That night, after Rose left, Sarah looked at Bill differently. She started talking to him more. During her shifts, telling him about her life, her son, her dreams of opening a community clinic someday. "Your horses miss you, Mr. Blackwood," she said while giving him his evening care. "Rose told me how you used to ride every morning. My daddy taught me to ride, you know. He worked at a stable in Virginia before he passed." Sarah didn't expect what happened next. Bill's hand twitched. It was slight but unmistakable. Excited, she noted it in his chart and reported it to Dr. Thompson. But when Victoria heard about it, she dismissed it entirely. "Oh, please," Victoria scoffed. She probably imagined it, or made it up for attention. "James, can we look into getting a different nurse assigned? Someone more suitable?" The hospital administrator, Dr. Roberts, called Sarah into his office the next day. "Sarah, you're one of our best nurses," he said carefully. "But Mrs. Blackwood has expressed some concerns." "Because I'm black?" Sarah asked directly. Dr. Roberts shifted uncomfortably. "She feels someone with more experience with high-profile patients would be more appropriate." "With all due respect, Dr. Roberts, I know what I saw," Mr. Blackwood responded, "and I won't abandon my patient because his wife has prejudices." To her surprise, Dr. Roberts smiled slightly. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Keep doing your job, Sarah. Some of us still believe that's what matters most." But Victoria's attempts to remove Sarah were just the beginning. Strange accidents started happening during Sarah's shifts. Equipment mysteriously unplugged, charts gone missing, schedules suddenly changed. The breaking point came when Sarah arrived one night to find Victoria with a new private nurse, a young blonde woman named Ashley. "Oh, didn't anyone tell you?" Victoria said with false sweetness. "We won't be needing your services anymore." But before Sarah could respond, Bill's monitors started beeping erratically. His blood pressure was dropping dangerously low. Without hesitation, Sarah pushed past Ashley and began emergency procedures she knew by heart. Within minutes, she had stabilized him. Ashley stood frozen, clearly overwhelmed. Victoria's face was a mask of fury. Dr. Thompson, who had witnessed everything, spoke firmly. "Mrs. Blackwood, Sarah stays. Your husband's life is more important than any personal preferences you might have." That night marked a turning point. The other hospital staff, who had watched everything unfold, began openly supporting Sarah. They'd seen her dedication, her skill, and her unwavering commitment to her patient. But Sarah knew Victoria wasn't done. The woman's cold eyes promised revenge, and the whispered phone calls with James Davidson continued. Something bigger was brewing, and Sarah had a feeling she was about to find herself in the middle of a storm that would shake Atlanta's high society to its core. Looking at Bill's peaceful face, Sarah made a silent promise. "Don't worry, Mr. Blackwood. No matter what your wife throws at me, I'll be here. Something tells me you're going to need all the real friends you can get when you wake up." She didn't know then how right she was, or how soon she would be tested. The real battle was just beginning, and the stakes were higher than she could imagine. 3 weeks after Bill's accident, Sarah arrived at work to find the hospital buzzing with gossip. Victoria Blackwood had been spotted at the city's most exclusive restaurant, dining intimately with Michael Preston, Bill's biggest business rival. "Just providing comfort to an old family friend," Victoria told the Society magazines, but Sarah had seen the way they held hands under the table when Michael visited the hospital, thinking no one was watching. That same week, Marcus, Sarah's son, came down with the flu. With no one else to watch him, she had to bring him to work one night. "Now, honey, you stay quiet in the break room with your coloring books," Sarah told him. "Mama's got to check on her patient." But during her rounds, she found Marcus sitting by Bill's bedside, telling the unconscious man all about his day at school. "And then Jimmy said I couldn't play basketball because my shoes were old, but I scored more points than anybody," Marcus was saying proudly. Sarah started to scold him, but then she noticed something extraordinary. Bill's brain activity monitors showed increased response during Marcus's story. "Mr. Blackwood seems to like your company, baby," Sarah said softly. After that, she occasionally let Marcus visit during her quiet night shifts, noticing how Bill's vital signs always improved when the boy was chattering away. One night, Victoria arrived unexpectedly during Marcus's visit, her face twisted with disgust. "This is completely unprofessional," she snapped. "A hospital room isn't a daycare center. James will hear about this." But Dr. Thompson reviewed the brain activity logs and was amazed. "Whatever your son is doing, Sarah, it's helping. Bill's responses are stronger than we've seen since the accident." The next day, James Davidson called an emergency board meeting at Blackwood Enterprises. Sarah only knew about it because Rose called her in tears. "They're trying to declare him permanently incapacitated," Rose explained. "Victoria would get control of everything. They're painting a picture that he was unstable even before the accident, saying he made questionable decisions." Sarah thought about the papers she'd seen scattered in Bill's room, documents about a community development project he'd planned, building affordable housing in struggling neighborhoods. Victoria had called it throwing money away on lost causes. That night, while checking Bill's vitals, Sarah found herself talking more than usual. "Your wife's planning something, Mr. Blackwood, but I've seen your heart through your work, through the way people like Rose talk about you. You're not the man they're trying to paint you as." To her shock, Bill's hand moved, his fingers wrapping weakly around hers. This time she had her phone ready and recorded it. But when she tried to show Dr. Roberts, she found her phone had been stolen from her locker. Victoria smiled smugly when Sarah confronted her. "Be careful making accusations, Nurse Johnson," Victoria warned. "It would be a shame if the medical board heard about you bringing your child to work, or about certain medications going missing during your shifts." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "You wouldn't dare try me, a black single mother with a record of stealing drugs. Who would they believe, you or me?" But Victoria had underestimated Sarah. The next day, Sarah brought in a small tape recorder, hiding it under Bill's pillow during Victoria's visits. What she captured was shocking. Victoria and Michael Preston planning to sell off Bill's companies piece by piece once they gained control. "The old fool actually believed in helping people," Victoria laughed, "as if that's how you stay rich. Once he's declared incompetent, we can do things our way." Sarah took the recording to Dr. Thompson and the hospital's legal team. They were appalled, but warned her to be careful. "People like Victoria Blackwood have a lot of power in this town," the hospital lawyer cautioned. But Sarah wouldn't back down. She thought about her father, who'd taught her to always stand up for what was right. She thought about Marcus, watching her example. And she thought about Bill lying helpless while people plotted to destroy everything he'd built. The next morning, Sarah arrived to find 2 police officers in Bill's room. Victoria stood there, tears streaming down her face. "That's her," Victoria sobbed, "the woman who's been stealing my husband's medication and endangering his life." Sarah felt the cold click of handcuffs around her wrists. As they led her away, she looked back at Bill. She could have sworn she saw his eyelids flutter. "Stay strong, Mr. Blackwood," she whispered. "The truth always comes out in the end." What Sarah didn't know was that her arrest would set off a chain of events that would shake Atlanta society to its foundations. Sometimes, she would later reflect, you have to hit rock bottom before justice can rise to the surface. In her small jail cell that night, Sarah held on to one thought. She had seen Bill's hand move, seen his responses to Marcus's stories. He was still in there, fighting to wake up. And as long as there was a fight to be fought, Sarah Johnson wasn't giving up. The next morning would bring unexpected allies, hidden evidence, and the first signs that Bill Blackwood was finally ready to wake up and face the truth about the woman he had married, and the woman who had never given up on him. Sarah spent a terrifying night in jail, thinking about Marcus staying with her neighbor and worrying about Bill's care. But help came from an unexpected source. Early the next morning, Rose appeared with Benjamin Harris, one of Atlanta's top defense attorneys. Bill kept security cameras in his home office, Rose explained. I've worked there for 30 years. I know where everything is, including the safe where he keeps evidence of all his business dealings. The lawyer smiled. And Mrs. Johnson, you'll be interested to know that those cameras picked up some very interesting conversations between Mrs. Blackwood and Mr. Preston about planting evidence against you. Within hours, Sarah was released. But when she returned to the hospital, she found she'd been suspended pending investigation. I'm sorry, Sarah, Dr. Roberts said. Our hands are tied until this is all sorted out. Victoria had planned it perfectly. Even with the charges dropped, the suspension meant Sarah couldn't protect Bill anymore. But Victoria hadn't counted on the loyalty Bill had earned over the years. The hospital staff began keeping detailed records of everything that happened during their shifts. Nurses, orderlies, even the cafeteria workers reported every suspicious movement Victoria and her friends made. Linda, the head nurse, caught Michael Preston trying to access Bill's medical records late one night. Just concerned about my old friend, he claimed, but Linda saw him trying to change the dosage orders on Bill's medications. Sarah spent her days building a case with Benjamin Harris, using Rose's evidence. They discovered Victoria had been quietly selling off Bill's personal assets, his beloved horses, his art collection, even the community center he'd been building. I feel so helpless. Sarah confided to Rose over coffee. Who knows what they're doing to him while I'm not there? Don't give up, Rose squeezed her hand. Bill always said you can tell a person's true character by how they act when everything is against them. Marcus was struggling to understand why his mother couldn't go to work anymore. But who's going to tell Mr. Bill's stories? He asked one night. He likes my stories, Mama. Sarah hugged her son tight, fighting back tears. Sometimes, baby, doing the right thing means making hard choices. Then came the news that Victoria and James Davidson had called another board meeting. This time they had a doctor ready to declare Bill would never recover consciousness. Once he's declared permanently vegetative, Benjamin explained, Victoria's power of attorney becomes absolute. She can pull the plug anytime she wants. Sarah felt her blood run cold. They wouldn't. Insurance policies pay out differently for death than long-term care, Benjamin said grimly. And with him gone, there'd be no one to challenge any of their actions. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Bill lying helpless in that hospital bed, about all the people depending on him, about Marcus asking every day when they could visit Mr. Bill again. At dawn, she made a decision. She called Benjamin. I want to file for an emergency medical guardianship, she said. As his former nurse, I can testify that he's showing signs of consciousness. We can demand new medical evaluations. They'll come after you with everything they have, Benjamin warned. Victoria's already spreading rumors about you being obsessed with Bill, calling you a gold digger. I don't care, Sarah said firmly. This isn't about me. It's about doing what's right. The media exploded with the story. Nurse claims rights to billionaire patient, screamed the headlines. Victoria played the grieving wife perfectly for the cameras, painting Sarah as an opportunist trying to steal her husband. But then something unexpected happened. Bill's employees started coming forward. Hundreds of them shared stories about his kindness, his integrity, his plans to use his wealth to help communities in need. They held rallies outside the hospital, demanding Sarah be reinstated. Even some of Atlanta's elite began questioning Victoria's actions. Longtime family friends remembered how quickly she'd pushed for control of everything, how she'd changed after the marriage. The pressure grew until the hospital had no choice but to agree to new neurological evaluations. Sarah was allowed to return to work under supervision. The first night back, she found Bill's room filled with fresh flowers and cards from his employees. Sitting beside his bed, checking his vitals just like before, she felt tears in her eyes. You've got a whole army fighting for you now, Mr. Blackwood, she said softly. All these people believe in you, so you've got to keep fighting too. And then it happened. Bill's eyes fluttered open for a brief moment. His monitors showed clear, conscious brain activity. Sarah hit the call button, and within minutes the room was filled with doctors. But before they arrived, Bill's lips moved slightly, forming a single word: Sarah. Victoria arrived an hour later to find the hospital in an uproar. Her husband was waking up, and the first word he'd spoken wasn't her name, but the name of the black nurse she'd tried to destroy. The look on Victoria's face made one thing clear: the real battle was just beginning. But this time, Sarah wasn't fighting alone, and somewhere deep inside, Bill Blackwood was finally fighting back too. The news of Bill's first word spread through the hospital like wildfire. Victoria tried to control the narrative, telling reporters that Sarah had imagined it, that any sounds were just random muscle movements. But the medical equipment had recorded everything. Bill Blackwood was definitely waking up. "This changes nothing," Victoria snapped at James Davidson in the hospital corridor. "We need to move faster. Once the business transfers are complete..." "Mrs. Blackwood," Dr. Thompson interrupted, walking up with Sarah and several specialists. "Your husband is showing strong signs of emerging consciousness. We need to discuss his care plan." Victoria's perfectly made-up face tightened. "I'm his wife. I'll make all the decisions about his care." "Actually," Benjamin Harris stepped forward, "papers in hand. Given the circumstances and evidence of potential conflicts of interest, the court has granted our petition for an independent medical guardian to be appointed." Victoria's scream of rage echoed through the hospital halls. Over the next few days, Bill's moments of consciousness grew longer. Sarah was there for each one, helping him focus his eyes, squeeze her hand, respond to simple questions. His brain was working to rebuild connections, healing slowly but surely. Marcus was overjoyed when Sarah told him the news. "Can I tell Mr. Bill about my baseball game? I hit a home run." "Soon, baby," Sarah promised. "He needs to get a little stronger first." But Victoria wasn't giving up. She called a press conference on the hospital steps, tears streaming down her face. "My husband is being kept from me by hospital staff who have overstepped their boundaries," she sobbed. "This nurse, this Sarah Johnson, has somehow convinced everyone she has my husband's best interests at heart. But where was she during our marriage? Where was she when we built our life together?" The reporters ate it up, but they also started digging deeper. They found Victoria's recent purchases, a new mansion in her name only, offshore bank accounts, suspicious transfers from Bill's business accounts. One afternoon, while Sarah was helping Bill with his therapy exercises, he managed to speak again. "Horse," he said weakly. "My horses." Sarah's heart broke, remembering what Rose had told her about Victoria selling his beloved animals. But then she had an idea. She pulled out her phone and showed Bill pictures of his horses that Rose had saved. "They're safe," she told him. "Your stable manager refused to sell them. He said he'd only take orders from you." A tear rolled down Bill's cheek. "The real you is still in there," Sarah said softly, wiping the tear away. "And we're not going to let anyone take away the things you love." That evening, Michael Preston made a mistake. Thinking the security cameras were off, he met Victoria in Bill's office at the mansion. "Everything's falling apart," Victoria hissed. "He wasn't supposed to wake up. The doctors said the damage was too severe." "Calm down," Michael said. "The transfers are almost complete. Once the merger goes through..." "And what happens when he can talk properly? When he tells everyone we caused the accident?" Neither of them noticed Rose in the shadows, her phone recording everything. Back at the hospital, Sarah worked tirelessly with Bill's therapy team. Every small victory was celebrated. The first time he could hold a cup, the day he stayed awake for 2 hours. The morning he smiled at one of Marcus's jokes. "You have a good boy," Bill managed to say one day, his voice still rough from months of disuse. Sarah paused in adjusting his pillows. "He's my whole world. I'm raising him to be a good man like his grandfather was." "Like you are." Bill's hand found hers. "Thank you for fighting for me." "Someone had to," Sarah replied simply. "I saw who you really were, even when you couldn't show us." That night, Rose brought the recording to Benjamin Harris. Within hours, arrest warrants were issued for both Victoria and Michael Preston. The headlines the next morning shocked Atlanta society. Billionaire's wife and business rival arrested for attempted murder. Sarah was checking Bill's vital signs when they brought him the news. His face showed no surprise, only a deep sadness. I knew something was wrong that night, he said slowly. Victoria was angry about the community project, said I was throwing away her future. The brake lines. Sarah squeezed his hand as he struggled with the painful memory. But you found the real truth, he continued. Saw the real me. It wasn't hard, Sarah smiled. Your actions spoke. Louder than anything Victoria could say. The way you treated people, the good you tried to do, that's the real Bill Blackwood. As the sun set over Atlanta, casting long shadows through the hospital window, Bill's recovery was far from complete. But something else was healing too. His faith in people, his trust in genuine care and compassion. Looking at Sarah, who had risked everything to protect him, Bill realized that sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as its greatest challenges. And sometimes true love isn't about fancy dinners and society parties. It's about someone seeing your real worth when you're at your weakest moment. The arrest of Victoria Blackwood and Michael Preston rocked Atlanta's high society. News vans camped outside the hospital, society ladies whispered behind their designer handbags, and social media exploded with speculation. But inside Bill's hospital room, a different kind of drama was unfolding. I should have seen it, Bill said during one of his therapy sessions. His voice was stronger now, though he still tired easily. All the signs were there. Sarah adjusted his pillows. Don't blame yourself. Victoria fooled a lot of people. Not you, he smiled weakly. You saw through her from the start. The investigation revealed the full scope of Victoria and Michael's plan. They had tampered with Bill's car, hoping the accident would either kill him or leave him permanently unconscious. Victoria had married Bill for his money, working with Michael to slowly take control of his empire. But their scheme had one fatal flaw. They hadn't counted on Sarah Johnson. The media couldn't get enough of the story. Black nurse saves billionaire ran one headline. Cinderella in scrubs declared another. Reporters kept trying to get interviews with Sarah, offering money for her rags to riches story. But it's not about that, Sarah told Marcus one night as she tucked him into bed. Sometimes doing the right thing is its own reward. Like when I helped Tommy with his math even though he was mean to me before, Marcus asked. Sarah kissed his forehead. Exactly like that, baby. At the hospital, Bill's recovery continued. Sarah stayed on as his primary nurse, but something was changing. In their relationship, she noticed how his eyes followed her around the room, how he smiled whenever Marcus visited, how he listened intently to every word she said. One day, during physical therapy, Bill struggled to stand for the first time since the accident. I've got you, Sarah said, supporting his weight. Just take it slow. Their faces were close, and for a moment something electric passed between them. Bill's hand tightened on her arm. Sarah, he said softly, I don't know what I would have done without you. Before she could respond, James Davidson burst into the room with a team of lawyers. Bill, we need to talk about the company, James said urgently. With Victoria's arrest, there's chaos in the boardroom. The shareholders are panicking. Bill's face hardened. Sarah, would you give us a minute? But as she turned to leave, Bill caught her hand. Actually, no. Stay. I want you to hear this. What followed was a revelation that stunned everyone in the room. Bill had been working on a secret project before his accident, a complete restructuring of his company to focus on community development and affordable housing. Victoria fought me on it, Bill explained, said it would ruin our lifestyle. But seeing how Sarah lives, how hard she works to give Marcus a better life, it just proves what I've always believed. Success means nothing if you're not using it to help others. James looked horrified. But the shareholder can either get on board or sell their shares, Bill said firmly. I've been given a second chance at life. I'm not going to waste it on just making more money. That evening, after his lawyers left, Bill asked Sarah to stay a little longer after her shift. There's something I need to say, he began, his voice serious. These past months, you've seen me at my absolute worst. You fought for me when everyone else was ready to write me off. You risked everything, your job, your reputation. I was just doing what was right, Sarah interrupted. No, Bill smiled. You did so much more than that. You showed me what real caring looks like. You and Marcus, you gave me something to fight for. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Mr. Blackwood, please, he said softly, call me Bill. But before either of them could say more, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Victoria's mother, Elizabeth Stanford, had arrived with her own team of lawyers. This is a mistake, she announced dramatically. My daughter is innocent. She would never hurt her beloved husband. Bill's face darkened. Sarah, would you please call security? And then Benjamin Harris, I think it's time we showed everyone the rest of the evidence Rose gathered. As Sarah made the calls, she couldn't help but notice how different Bill was. Now stronger, more determined, yet somehow gentler too. The man emerging from this ordeal wasn't the same billionaire who had crashed his car that fateful night. He was someone new, someone who had learned the hard way what really matters in life. But the biggest challenges still lay ahead. Victoria's trial would captivate the city. Old money families would resist Bill's new business direction, and Sarah would face scrutiny like she'd never known before. The question wasn't just whether their growing feelings for each other could survive. It was whether Atlanta's elite society was ready to accept a relationship that crossed every boundary they held dear. As the sun set over the city skyline, Sarah watched Bill dozing peacefully in his hospital bed. Whatever came next, one thing was certain. Life would never be the same for either of them again. Victoria Blackwood's trial became the biggest spectacle Atlanta had seen in years. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters every day, and the city's elite packed the gallery, hanging on every word of testimony. Sarah had to take time off work to testify. The night before her court appearance, she was nervous wreck. "What if I say something wrong?" she asked Bill during her visit to his room. He was sitting up now, getting stronger every day. "Victoria's lawyer is going to try to make me look bad." "Just tell the truth," Bill said, taking her hand. "That's all you've ever done." But Victoria's defense team was brutal. They painted Sarah as a calculating gold digger who had manipulated her way into Bill's life. They brought up her financial struggles, her single motherhood, even her father's work as a stable hand. "Isn't it true," Victoria's lawyer sneered, "that you saw Mr. Blackwood as your ticket out of poverty?" Sarah held her head high. "No, sir, I saw him as a patient who needed help when everyone else had given up on him." "A patient?" The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Is that why you brought your son to visit him, why you spent hours talking to him, reading to him? Were those normal nursing duties?" "They were human duties," Sarah replied firmly. "Mr. Blackwood wasn't just a rich man in a bed. He was a person who needed connection, who needed someone to fight for him while he couldn't fight for himself." From his wheelchair in the gallery, Bill watched Sarah with pride. She was everything Victoria wasn't. Genuine, compassionate, strong without being hard. But the trial took its toll. Marcus came home from school crying one day because some kids had teased him about his mom being on TV. "They said you only like Mr. Bill because he's rich," Marcus sobbed. Sarah held her son close. "Baby, remember what Granddaddy used to say? A person's worth isn't in their wallet, it's in their heart. I care about Mr. Bill because he's a good man who needed help, just like I taught you to help others when they need it." The prosecution's case was strong. Rose's recordings, the financial records, and the evidence of tampering with Bill's car painted a clear picture of Victoria and Michael's scheme. But the defense had one last card to play. They called Dr. Roberts to the stand and questioned him about Bill's mental state. "Isn't it possible," Victoria's lawyer suggested, "that Mr. Blackwood's apparent feelings for Nurse Johnson are just a result of his brain injury, a kind of confusion or transference?" The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Sarah felt her heart sink. She'd been so careful not to take advantage of Bill's vulnerability, to keep things professional despite their growing closeness. But then Bill did something that shocked everyone. Despite his doctor's advice, he insisted on taking the stand. "Mr. Blackwood," the prosecutor began, "please tell the court about your relationship with the defendant, Victoria Stanford Blackwood." Bill's voice was clear and strong. "I thought I loved her, but what I felt for Victoria was nothing like real love. Real love isn't about society parties and public appearances. It's about someone seeing your true self and standing by you when everyone else walks away." Victoria's face turned ugly. "You ungrateful fool," she screamed, jumping up. "Everything I did was to save you from throwing away our fortune on your ridiculous charity projects." The outburst sealed her fate. The jury took only 3 hours to find both Victoria and Michael guilty on all counts. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Sarah. "How does it feel to be vindicated? Are you and Mr. Blackwood romantically involved? What do you say to people who call this a modern Cinderella story?" But Sarah just smiled. "This isn't a fairy tale. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to pick up my son from school." That evening, she brought Marcus to visit Bill in his private rehabilitation facility. The boy ran to Bill's wheelchair with a paper in his hand. "Look, I got an A on my math test." Bill's face lit up. "That's fantastic, buddy." Those extra practice problems we did really paid off, huh? Sarah watched them together, her heart full. But she also saw the photographers outside the window, the curious stares from the staff, the weight of public attention that would only grow heavier. Later, when Marcus was absorbed in his homework, Bill reached for Sarah's hand. "We need to talk," he said softly, "about us, about what happens next." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. The trial was over, but their story was far from finished. And the biggest challenge yet lay ahead, convincing the world that what they had wasn't about money or status or fairy tales. It was about two people who had found each other in the darkest of times and the light they'd created together. The weeks following Victoria's conviction brought changes nobody could have predicted. Bill threw himself into physical therapy, determined to walk again. Sarah returned to her regular nursing duties, trying to maintain normalcy despite her newfound fame. But nothing was normal anymore. Every time they were seen together, photos appeared in the society pages. "Billionaire and nurse. Love or manipulation?" the headlines questioned. "Don't they have anything better to write about?" Sarah sighed one morning, tossing aside a magazine with their picture on the cover. "Actually," Bill said, wheeling himself across his private rehab room, "I've been thinking about that, about all of it." He had that look in his eyes that Sarah had come to recognize, the one that meant he was planning something big. "I want to tell our story," he continued, "but the real story, not their version, about how you saved not just my life, but my soul, about what really matters in this world." Before Sarah could respond, Marcus burst into the room excited about his school's upcoming father-daughter dance. "Tommy's dad said I can't go because I don't have a dad," Marcus said, his voice small. "He said it's only for real families." Bill's face darkened. "Come here, buddy." He patted his lap and Marcus climbed up carefully, mindful of the tubes and monitors. "You know what makes a real family? Love, caring, looking out for each other, just like you and your mum do." Sarah watched them together, her heart swelling. Over the past months, Bill had become a father figure to Marcus, helping with homework, sharing stories, teaching him about horses. It was more than she'd ever dreamed possible for her son, but not everyone was happy about their relationship. One afternoon, Elizabeth Stanford, Victoria's mother, confronted Sarah outside the rehabilitation center. "I know what you're doing," she hissed. "Working your way into his life, using that child to play on his emotions. People like you always want what we have." "People like me?" Sarah stood her ground. "You mean people who care about others? Who see value in something besides money?" "Yes, I guess I am like that." The confrontation made the news, of course, but this time, something unexpected happened. Letters and emails started pouring in from people around the country. Mixed-race couples, single parents, people who had found love across social boundaries. "Your story gives us hope," they wrote. Bill was making progress in his recovery. The day he took his first steps without support, Sarah was there, tears in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said, pulling her close. "You did the hard work," she insisted. "I just believed in you." "That's exactly what I mean." His voice was soft. "You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." That weekend, Bill insisted on taking Sarah and Marcus to his stable. His prized horses had been returned, and he was determined to share his love of riding with them. "My daddy taught me to ride," Sarah said, helping Marcus onto a gentle mare. "I know," Bill smiled. "You mentioned it once when you thought I couldn't hear you. You told me a lot of things during those long nights." Sarah blushed. "I talked too much." "You talked just enough." Bill reached for her hand. "Every word helped bring me back." But their peaceful moment was interrupted by James Davidson, rushing up with urgent news. The shareholders were revolting against Bill's plans to restructure the company for community development. "They're threatening to sell their shares," James warned. "The stock price is dropping." Bill remained calm. "Let them sell. Sometimes you have to lose something to gain something better." That evening, Bill called a press conference. Standing tall with his cane, Sarah and Marcus by his side, he addressed the world. "People keep asking about my relationship with Sarah Johnson," he began. "They want to know if it's appropriate, if it's proper, if it's good for business. Well, let me tell you what's good for business. Integrity, compassion, using our resources to help others." He announced the creation of the Johnson Blackwood Foundation, dedicated to providing healthcare and education opportunities in underserved communities. "Sarah and Marcus taught me that true wealth isn't about money," he continued. "It's about the lives you touch, the differences you make. And I'm proud to say they've agreed to help me make those differences, not just as partners in the foundation, but as my family. The reporters erupted with questions, but Bill wasn't finished. With tears in his eyes, he turned to Sarah. "You once promised never to leave me," he said softly. "Now I want to make the same promise to you." Sarah's heart stopped as Bill slowly, carefully got down on one knee. But before he could speak, the words that would change their lives forever, a commotion broke out at the back of the room. Someone was pushing through the crowd, someone they never expected to see again. The crowd parted to reveal Victoria's brother, Richard Stanford, with a team of lawyers behind him. "I'm sorry to interrupt this touching moment," Richard sneered, "but I have documents proving that William Blackwood isn't mentally competent to make these decisions." Bill struggled to his feet from his kneeling position, his face hard. Sarah stepped forward to help him, but he squeezed her hand, wanting to stand on his own. "What are you talking about, Richard?" Bill's voice was steady. Richard held up a file. "Medical evaluations from right after your accident showing severe brain trauma, and recent psychological assessments suggesting you're suffering from emotional manipulation and dependency. We're filing for conservatorship." The reporters went wild, cameras flashing. Marcus grabbed Sarah's hand, scared by the chaos. "It's okay, baby," Sarah whispered, though her own heart was racing. They should have known the Stanford family wouldn't give up so easily. Bill's voice cut through the noise. "That's enough." The room fell silent. "I've spent months rebuilding my strength, not just physically but mentally. Every doctor at Mercy General can testify to my competence." "Ah, yes, Mercy General," Richard smiled coldly, "where your nurse girlfriend works. Very convenient." Sarah felt her face burn, but before she could respond, an unexpected voice rang out. "I can testify too." Everyone turned to see Dr. Elizabeth Chen, one of Atlanta's most respected neurologists, walking into the room. "I've been independently monitoring Mr. Blackwood's recovery for the past 2 months, Dr. Chen announced, at the request of his insurance company, and I can state unequivocally that he is of sound mind and fully capable of making his own decisions." Richard's face reddened. "But the trauma led to a remarkable recovery," Dr. Chen interrupted. "In fact, Mr. Blackwood's case will be featured in next month's Journal of Neurology. His brain scans show exceptional healing, partly due to the innovative care approaches used during his coma." She smiled at Sarah. "Sometimes love really is the best medicine." But Richard had one more card to play. He turned to Sarah. "What about your past, Ms. Johnson? The real reason you left your last nursing job in Virginia?" Sarah felt her blood run cold. How did he know about that? Bill moved closer to her. "Whatever it is, Sarah, we'll face it together." Sarah took a deep breath. 6 years ago, I was fired for insubordination. I refused to falsify medical records when a wealthy patient's family wanted to hide his alcoholism. They blackballed me from every hospital in the area. That's why I moved to Atlanta, to give Marcus a fresh start. She turned to the reporters. "I've never hidden who I am or what I believe in. I lost my job because I wouldn't lie, and I'd do it again. Because some things matter more than money or status, like truth and dignity, and doing what's right." The room was silent for a moment. Then, surprisingly, applause broke out. It started with Rose, who had slipped in during the commotion, and spread until the whole room was clapping. Richard looked around, realizing he was losing control of the situation. "This isn't over," he threatened. "The Stanford family has influence." "The Stanford family," Bill cut in, "is about to learn that influence works both ways. Your sister tried to kill me, Richard. She's in prison. Your family's reputation is already in shambles. Do you really want to make it worse by fighting a losing battle?" Benjamin Harris stepped forward with his own file. "We've been doing some investigating of our own, Mr. Stanford, about certain tax irregularities in your family's foundation. Would you like to discuss those publicly?" Richard's face went pale. Without another word, he and his lawyers retreated. In the aftermath, reporters surrounded them again, but Bill raised his hand for silence. "Now," he said, turning back to Sarah with a smile. "Where were we?" He started to kneel again, but Sarah stopped him, mindful of his still healing legs. "Stay standing," she said softly. "We've both spent enough time on our knees." "Sarah Johnson," Bill took her hands in his. "You saved my life in every way a life can be saved. You showed me what real love looks like. You and Marcus have become my family in every way that matters. Will you—" "Yes," Sarah interrupted, tears streaming down her face. "Yes to everything." Marcus tugged on Bill's jacket. "Does this mean I can call you Dad?" Bill lifted Marcus up with strength he didn't know he had. "I would be honored, son." As they embraced, the cameras flashed again, but this time Sarah didn't mind. Let the world see what real love looks like. Let them see that family isn't about blood or status, but about hearts that choose each other. But even as they celebrated, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't heard the last from the Stanford family. Victoria might be in prison, and Richard might be temporarily defeated, but people like that didn't give up easily. Their happiness had been hard-won, and Sarah knew they would have to fight to keep it. But looking at Bill and Marcus together, she knew that whatever came next, they would face it as a family. The autumn leaves were turning golden in Atlanta when Sarah Johnson became Sarah Blackwood. The ceremony wasn't at some fancy country club or elite social venue. Instead, they chose the hospital garden where they had spent so many hours during Bill's recovery. Some people might think it's strange to get married at a hospital, Bill said in his vows, standing tall without his cane. But this is where our story began. This is where I learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters. Sarah, radiant in a simple white dress, wiped tears from her eyes as she responded. I fell in love with you twice, she said. First with the man who needed my help and then with the man who fought his way back to us. Marcus, handsome in his little tuxedo, proudly carried the rings. Does this mean we're officially a real family now? He asked after the ceremony. We've been a real family for a long time, Bill said, hugging him. This just makes it official for everyone else. The guest list surprised Atlanta society. Alongside business leaders and city officials were nurses, orderlies, and hospital staff. Rose was there, of course, beaming with pride. But the most touching moment came when Dr. Thompson walked in with a special guest, one of Bill's former physical therapists, who was now a student at medical school thanks to the Johnson Blackwood Foundation's scholarship program. Even some of the society ladies who had once looked down on Sarah were there, though perhaps more out of curiosity than genuine goodwill. But Sarah didn't mind. She knew that change happens slowly, one heart at a time. The reception was in full swing when Benjamin Harris arrived with news. Victoria had tried to appeal her conviction, but the court had denied it. She and Michael Preston would serve their full sentences. The Stanford family's influence isn't what it used to be, Benjamin smiled. Amazing how quickly people distance themselves from scandal. But Sarah and Bill had already moved on to building something new. The Johnson Blackwood Foundation was transforming lives across the city. They had opened 3 community health clinics in underserved neighborhoods, with more planned. Bill's company was partnering with local organizations to build affordable housing, creating jobs and opportunities. You've changed this city, Mayor Richardson said in his toast, not just with your money, but with your example. You've shown us that love knows no boundaries, that second chances are possible, and that true character shows itself in how we treat others. Later that evening, as the celebration continued, Bill led Sarah to a quiet corner of the garden. I have a surprise for you, he said, pulling out an envelope. Inside was a deed to a new building, the future home of the Sarah Johnson School of Nursing. Because every dreamer deserves a chance, Bill explained. Just like you gave me. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Bill, this is too much. Nothing is too much for the woman who saved my life. Besides, he grinned, I had some help. Marcus came running up with more news. He'd gotten the lead in his school play, and his teacher had asked if Bill would help build sets since he was good at building things. Of course I will, Bill laughed. That's what dads do. As the sun set over Atlanta, casting a golden glow over the garden, Sarah looked at her new family, her brilliant, kind-hearted son, and the man who had proven that true love could overcome any obstacle. Penny, for your thoughts? Bill asked, pulling her close. I was just thinking about that first night in the hospital, Sarah said, when everyone said you'd never wake up, never recover. Look at you now. Look at us now, he corrected. You know, people call this a fairy tale, but they're wrong. Fairy tales are about magic and miracles. This is about something much more powerful. It's about faith and hard work and never giving up on what you believe in. Marcus joined them, and as they stood together watching the stars come out, Sarah realized that sometimes life's greatest gifts come in its darkest moments. Sometimes it takes almost losing everything to find what you were meant to have all along. The next morning, the society pages would run their usual stories about the nurse who became a queen of Atlanta society. But Sarah knew the truth. She hadn't joined high society. She and Bill had created something entirely new, a world where people were judged by their character, not their color or class. A world where love really could conquer all. As they drove away from the reception, they passed the hospital where their story began. The lights were on in the ICU where other nurses were caring for other patients, fighting other battles. "You know," Bill said, squeezing her hand, "some people spend their whole lives looking for their purpose. I had to lose everything to find mine." "And what's that?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. "To love, to help others, to make a difference." He smiled at Marcus, sleeping in the back seat. "To be a father and a husband, to be the man you always saw in me, even when I couldn't see it myself." They had faced every obstacle: prejudice, violence, betrayal, and doubt. But in the end, love had won. Not the fairy tale kind of love, but the real kind. The kind that fights and sacrifices and never gives up. And as they drove toward their future together, Sarah knew that while their story might seem like a fantasy to some, it was actually about the most real thing in the world: the power of the human heart to overcome any obstacle, to bridge any divide, and to find light in even the darkest places. The end